Okay, moving on to the next item, the recommendation of the Cedar River Flood Control System Master Plan. And who will be presenting that?
That will be me.
That will be you. All right. And I think, again, could we, and we'll take questions. Justin, do you want questions as we go through that? Would that be easier, or do you want to wait until the end?
I'm a little bit familiar with it, so I don't know if I'll have some, but
Okay,
it's probably be easier, wouldn't it, just to ask as we
I'm
go?
fine with that.
okay, great. All right, you're on.
Well, this is the effort of about the last 9 months. Going back, we're looking at a master plan here because we're about to embark on major construction effort, the city's largest CIP that we will undertake, in much like those cities we just talked about. So we need some direction and policy so that we invest the public funds wisely. Just looking at some of the activities we've done, we started with an interim flood control plan months after the flood, and that's actually still in place, and we'll continue to use that. Can you go back?
Yes, I'm sorry.
And part of the GRI, we're getting credit, and rightfully so, for these acquisition programs we've done with federal funds over that 5 years, some 1,300 properties. And we've basically finished, we're out of the recovery, we've finished all the buildings. This was really one of the last ones. We're sitting in here in 2012 to 14 timeframe, we're finishing the buildings. And in December of 2013, we got the GRI approval, and the agreement was executed in January 2014. And now this is the culmination of, okay, we've got a funding source, let's get that master plan in place, because really before we had concepts, we had a idea what we wanted to do, but now that we have the funding source, we really need to validate what we were about to embark upon. Next slide. So what is this document, this master plan? It's a guide for our construction for the next 20 years, which is the life of the GRI. It's going to give City Council direction on key policy items that will help the design team to proceed with that implementation of the flood control system. One of the things that's really important to note, I just said 20 years, there is no way this document is going to remain unchanged in 20 years. It has been set up to be changed, to be modified, to be amended, to have sections added as new policy items may come up. It's also a tool for communicating to the public. Your question is?
Rob, I don't know exactly in your presentation how much of this is going to be stuff that we had to get state approval when they approved the GRI originally. They have some say in what we do to some degree, so it's not just something that we can do all on our own.
Well, what I can tell you is you're absolutely correct, and this presentation I'm giving you today, I spent 2 hours with the state last week going through this document to make sure that they are also on board, because they're paying 50% of the freight of this with their programs, so essentially. So that's a very good point, and we will keep that relationship going. They understand what policy items. They were very comfortable with this document, complimentary to the effort. So I think you have their endorsement, the state staff's endorsement to move forward with this. And then what we will do after this has been adopted, we will upload this to their system so that all the flood mitigation board members can read it.
Thank you.
So I guess we can add tool communicating with the state as well, Emily. So what does the master plan include? Well, it's set up in a series of chapters so that we can add chapters or add policies as items come up, so we don't have to redo the entire document. It's much like a design standards or even the state code. When the state used to have state code, you have to replace certain sections, but they didn't reissue the entire book. The initial adoption has an introduction, which is chapter 1, then it has an executive summary, then it goes into the actual plan, which is listed here as the alignment. It discusses what is recommended in terms of a wall, in terms of a levee, in terms of a combination removable and permanent wall, where gates are proposed. It also talks about the height of it, and where not only the physical improvement scope, but also where the project area is. That's the area that's needed for operating the system, such as pump stations or temporary easements or contractor staging areas, or staging areas to build the removable walls. The other sections, obviously budget is important. That follows right after the actual plan. This is slightly out of order from the way the book shows. Then there's a section on implementation, and what that does is try to lay out a roadmap for what's the sequence and with which we're going to build these sections. It's divided into 8 sections plus Edgewood Road bridge approach. And then the last section is the property acquisition and disposition policy. That gives guidance not only to the public and to the staff as to how the council's policies would govern acquisitions. It's important for the public that they get the who, what, where, when, why, how. So the document that we have is going to be slightly modified to make sure that that map is very clear, and this will be before it goes to full council. Is your property in the zone, or is it out of that zone? Are you going to be acquired, yes or no? Is that the, and then we'll talk about the implementation has a schedule, so we wanted to get the when, which is the general time frame. We'll kind of break into 5-year increments, but also the what. Is that property needed or is it not needed? Is it mandatory? Is it going to be voluntary? So I think this will answer those 5 questions for the public and give direction to staff. It also, embedded within each section is some communication and public outreach policies and methods that will be used. And as I said in the last slide, this is set up to be revised. Each chapter has its own page numbering system, and each has each figures and tables so that we can add new sections without having to go back and redo the entire report. So getting into the alignment, just some general statements that, this is right now is, over 60-page document, but the goal is to protect as many properties as possible. And that will be done with levees, permanent and removable flood walls and gates. And those are selected to try to integrate the neighborhood characteristics. There are some locations where taking into deference the effort that, say, our maintenance staff would have to undergo, there's a combination removable and permanent wall, where the permanent would have a sill, permanent wall up to about the 100-year flood, and then above that you would have removable logs like we saw the picture that Grand Forks was using. And by doing that, that's that last bullet, and that allows us to maximize the enjoyment of the river, to maintain that access with the river, while providing some additional protection in the meantime. Some of the considerations, this wasn't just done with a few people in a back room. I'm sure everyone knows this because we've had very significant public outreach. We've had 2 open houses. Council has provided guidance. We've had environmental reviews. We've had the State Historic Preservation Office review. Significant discussions with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers as the east side is eligible for federal funding. It's not yet appropriated. We've met with the private and public utilities. Some of the other things were the view sheds. We've also talked to the property owners on both sides individual meetings as we've gone through this to get concerns and opinions as well. So that leads to this map. If anyone wants to look at it later, there's the board right behind Rob and Cash here after we're done with the meeting. But this is essentially what's shown in the executive summary. That's the plan. The purple is the levee structure. Kind of hard to see all the different colors here, but the red is a wall, and there's gates, and then there's some kind of multicolored one which shows where the removable walls are. And as you go up from the Quaker Oats area, there's a dashed line that shows the option to continue this north along the railroad isthmus by Cedar, along and protect the Cedar Lake as well as the Shaver Road area. But that's essentially, in a nutshell, what the system is, and that's in the. This is a pull out right from the executive summary. Some of the highlights of where these different features go. In Kingston and downtown, there's more permanent walls with the removables above them, as there's more access to river there. Czech Village and Newbo and Sinclair have more of the levees and the trails going over the levees to access the river. And then you've got Time Check, that's got a levee, but there's also a nice gateway element that provides access to the river. And a lot less on this, some of the other areas where the industry is, Quaker, Penford, Cargill, those are just permanent walls. So again, those are met with the integration of neighborhood. I think one of the terms maybe not used as much today is context-sensitive design. Those are picked to match the neighborhood needs. And again, this isn't really all that different than what was shown at the public open house most recently. The chapter on implementation and sequencing really looked at a few items here. There's a engineering component, and then there's a neighborhood social economic development component. Those were combined together to suggest a prioritization between those. And what that does is that will be used in combination with our current flood control plan for the interim. We've seen it with HESCO barriers and the cones we put up over the manholes. So between the segments being built, we will still use that flood control plan in the meantime. And when those were all put together, the priorities came out where the segments will move from one side of the river to the other. It's not all one side and then the other. And what Klaus, you can move to the next slide, is it's broken down into 8 segments here, but there may be some sub-segments we work on outside of this overall general suggestion. And so the first 2 areas are Newbo, Sinclair, and Czech Village that were listed as the top priorities. And we have a design contract with 2 firms right now, so we'll begin those concurrently. The schedule will vary somewhat depending on acquisitions and design issues and permitting. But Newbo Sinclair, for example, was scored highly because it sits low, and by putting in the walls and levees now, there is actually flood protection achieved, not to the 2008 level, but it is achieved to the 100-year level or so. And we may recall last year, very intensive efforts by our sewer maintenance division to protect that area, and business went on as normal. So if we can protect that area first, then we will have more time for the maintenance crews to do other things citywide. Czech Village also sits low. That was one of the first areas to get inundated in 2008. But also when you start building things across the river in Newbo, Sinclair, that raises the water even more in Czech Village, so that's why that came right behind it in the second priority. And then there's kind of the intermediate category, the 5 to 10 year time frame. This is the north tie-in to Interstate 380, That is the Army Corps of Engineers top section they would like to work on. We're, actually, I'm curious to see the results. The Quaker Oats bids are being opened as we're sitting here right now for the 1,800 foot flood wall around there. And then,
So,
yeah,
so does that, the North Industrial, when you say that, that's just, so make the differentiation for me between what's going around Quaker now and what could be the proposed wall that goes straight north and tags in
sure.
beyond that.
The Quaker wall is tying in, they have elevator G, which is, it's near the tracks, but it doesn't, what's going on Quaker does not go all the way to tie in, so water can get in back around that system. So we are building that flood wall about 8 feet higher to cover the 2008 flood volume. And because we're building the system, it actually raises the water about 3 to 4 feet. But the true protection is not achieved to that level because water can get around the back side and get into the city that way. So by closing off that section, that investment on Quaker then protects them beyond the 100-year flood and up higher. And then, as I said, this has the option to continue further along up towards the Shaver Road area. Was that clear?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and Kingston Village, you know, I would say right now that's shown as priority 4. That's certainly subject to change, which is why we put on the slide initial time frame. It might have scored higher. I actually thought it might have initially when we were talking about a casino. There would have been more to protect out there. As that encourages development, we may want to do some things over there, but right now there isn't as much to protect there as say there is at Newbo right now. But it's up and coming, and that's why I think that is subject to change there. And as you move down the list, the downtown is fairly well protected by our interim flood protection plan. Excuse me. That's why that might have you might have thought intuitively might have scored higher, but we actually have pretty good protection for the downtown area. That's not one of the first areas to flood. And as you move down the last time check, Cargill and Penford finish out the later years of the program. And we listed on the bottom that Edgewood Road, northwest, the bridge approach, that's also included in the GRI funding, but we left that as an undefined schedule. It's going to be more dependent on the pavement condition out there, maybe when the bridge condition is, maybe when we need to replace that bridge. We will do some initial engineering on that, work for some other grants, and because of Highway 100, we'll at least have we'll have additional crossing in that area of the metro area. And again, I just want to highlight that asterisk because it's a good table, but we have to remember this document is subject to change. And we write the C10s will change depending upon grants, developments, opportunities, things such as that. I'm certainly hoping that there's an opportunity on that former casino site before the end of the 20 years. And the possibly breaking the subsegments. And for example, we're already working on the railroad gate closure at Quaker. So we may go back to do a very small project in the North Industrial area, even though that's shown as number 3. And that's a 50-foot gap where the UP Railroad is. That will be closed with ESCOs in the meantime. And one of the newer things that really that wasn't highlighted as much at the public open houses is the acquisition policy. What it does, it'll differentiate between mandatory and voluntary properties for the flood control system. An example of a mandatory one, other than the obvious, it's right underneath the levees or walls, is areas that are needed for maintenance and operation, staging areas, for example, to get the gates in or the walls in. A voluntary example would be downstream of the flood control system, for example, in the Rompot area. Just because we're not protecting that with a levee or a wall does not mean that we aren't going to look at removing that neighborhood from harm's way. So those are some voluntary acquisitions. It also provides some guidelines on when a flowage easement might be used. A flowage easement is taking a property right from a property to flow more water through there, and that's occurring because the existence of the system raises the water surface elevation.
And how much does it raise it, are we anticipating?
When you're, well, that's varying on what the flow is, but at the 2008 flood volume is between 3 and 4 feet in that area. It attenuates down to less than a foot by the time you get to payload. If you're looking at the 100-year flood, you don't see anything. So you really have to have some significant water in the river to actually see any impacts from this. I mean, most of the time, 99.99% of the time, the system won't be there and it won't be affecting any flood volume. And I didn't look today, but I imagine maybe there's 10,000 cubic feet per second in the river, and the flood was 140,000 cubic feet per second, and the 100-year flood is 94,000 cubic feet per second. So you really have to go about 9 times the volume of water that you have just today to start even seeing, an infinitesimal amount of rise through the system. And then lastly, I think this is that same thing that John mentioned about Fargo. I think we were all impressed with them, and the acquisition policy includes a buy early provision. If people are ready to sell, even though they're not till phase 6, this gives precedent or preference to buying them out versus the construction schedule. It also, as I said, it also provides some schedule to when they know how long they can stay. So if someone wants to stay the 10 plus years, they have that confidence that they don't have to worry about this every month or two. But at the same time, if they know something's going to happen, they know that they have a willing buyer in the city.
So, I think that was really important. When I've talked with, and we can go into this a little further, but when I've talked with some of the residents, they wanted a couple things. They wanted to know, give me some certainty. Tell me, to your best knowledge and ability, where this alignment's gonna go. Give me some certainty so I can move on with my life. And let me know how long out it's going to be. And city, are you willing to work with us? So if we don't need the property for 10 years, for example, I'm thinking of the time check area. If we don't need that property for 10 years, and there are a lot of older people along there, can I stay until such a time as you actually are in a position to need the property? And so I really like that opportunity for people. If they're ready to sell now, certainly we can buy them out, but they may want to be there for 10 years or 7 years, and when they're ready, then we would buy them out. And I like that, and I think that rather than in the eminent domain, which I hate, I much rather see us working with those residents and saying, listen, we know we're not going to have the money immediately. There's no use in taking this property until such a time as we actually need it for construction. And I really do like the fact that we've put this into policy. But if they're ready to sell, great. If they're not, that's fine too.
I think I would also add, by the adoption of this master plan, we pretty well limited their ability to sell it to a third party.
Yes.
Because someone may not want to buy it, knowing that there's essentially a big shaded green area that says we need your property for this coming up. So we really had to add that buy early provision too, because of the limitation we just put on the third parties to buy that. Less or so, and this will be enhanced. As I said, changes would be coming. The disposition policy, it basically kind of starts out with the city's been buying properties for the last 5 years, as I had mentioned, and some of those properties we may dispose of, and where might those be? And we do lay out in this upstream and downstream of the flood control system. Those are unprotected areas that we bought. What's the policy on disposing of those? And then what's also going to be the policy in this project area? We want to be careful not to dispose of a property and then say, ah, shucks, we gotta go buy it back again. So we've discussed those two first bullet items, and then the last one, this is just a forecast of something that will be likely added within the next year after public input on project properties that are going to be zoned public. Which are those, and then which other ones may be able to dispose of if they're away from the project they're in. That needs some vetting of the public, so we're not ready to put that in at this point. The budget, we talked about the state before. The state's got 263.7 million maximum cap on our involvement, or their involvement. We went back and checked our conceptual estimate versus a more detailed estimate now, and our hats off to those estimators. We were within 5% of the GRI application, which we did a couple years ago with just rough order of magnitude numbers. This actually looked at heights of the walls and where the types of walls were, and it was very close. One of the things also is the system is about 1,200 feet longer than it was in the GRI application because of going a little bit further up that isthmus by Quaker. So really, it's pretty well dead on with on a per foot basis. We talked about a $570 million program. There's about $400 million to go in this construction, design, permitting, et cetera. 2/3 of that's the construction in round numbers, and 1/3 of that is pre-construction activities, which could be the design or the acquisitions, permitting, et cetera. Communications, I said, this is kind of embedded in each of the sections, but this is still going to remain a critical component. We've got our websites, we use media, social media, we've got Cedar Talks, and we've seen things at the RCR magazine. Perhaps some of you came and talked to me at the Cedar Rapids Farmers Market on June 6th. We're going to do another one of those. There'll be a Cedar Rapids night at the Colonel's in July. We're going to have some information hit out there. The next one we're going to do is just following up on whatever this document is adopted as. I mean, assuming the council may have some changes or not, we'll present that to the public at July 9th. We'll have another open house. That's really not a question or input as much as it is just to share with the public what the council has adopted. And then we will move on to other chapters and receive more public input. I forecast a section that'll come in the future, which will be on aesthetic guidelines. We'll open that up for more public input, but again, July 9th isn't about doing that. And then this slide actually started out extremely long with all the thanks we wanted to give. And then we said, it's just too long. Let's just thank the countless residents, property owners, and business leaders who helped us. I also personally would like to thank the council members. I know you have a part-time position, and you really have given us much more time than you would typically have for a project master plan. But it is a big project, and staff really does appreciate your efforts. I know we have Howard Green and Stanley in the back, and although we pay them, I do want to thank you personally. You clearly over the last 9 months to exhibit, you also have a personal and emotional stake in this, and we really do appreciate all your efforts too. That's the end of the slideshow here, and I'm happy to take any comments or questions.
Okay. So now turn the lights back on for us. It's back in the corner. Is that Caleb? Thanks, Caleb. Justin?
I don't have any questions, just a comment. Rob, as you know, I don't know how old you are, but this project has a tendency to outlive some of us. It is a huge undertaking, be the biggest thing that's ever been done construction-wise in Cedar Rapids. And it's certainly a necessary thing to protect billions of dollars worth of property. I think we probably ended up totaling about $7 billion with the last flood we had. So it's a huge investment, huge public construction project. it needs to be done, and I think we're certainly on the right track to getting it completed. And I like your comment that we all understand it's kind of a living project, that we know it's gonna have to change from time to time as the world evolves and things change. We have to understand that this is not a rock solid thing. That there may have to be changes made, and I think that's built in, as you had said, and I think we're well on our way, and I think you did a good job with this. Be my comments.
Thank you, Justin. Well, I've mentioned before, first of all, let me get the thank yous out of the way. We've got an incredible staff, and every day you guys step up and do some amazing work, and pulling all of this together along with HR Green and Stanley it's really been a solid team effort. A special thanks to our consultants who went out and did the stakeholder meetings and met with the neighborhoods, and just went back out to revisit this. After the flood of 2008, there was a lot going on, and I felt personally that we needed to go back out and touch our community, because at the time that those initial meetings took place, people were still mucking out their homes and were still trying to determine where they were going to live and what their world really looked like. So I felt it was extremely important and appropriate that we go back and take another look, 6 years later, almost 7 years later. So I'm happy we did that due diligence. I think it was really critical to the process and important to the process. Not only, are we going to, is this the largest, construction investment, but this system, as I said, is probably one of the most important decisions that we will face. Certainly in my short time on council, it's one of the most important decisions, because we will live with this for generations to come. It will have an impact upon our community for decades. And I want to do it right. I feel, I'm sure like Justin does, and that when you do something, do it right. And make sure that it's something that, our community can live with. I was given this charge with the advice from the mayor, and he said, Annie, do it right. He said, first of all, protect our community, number one, both sides of the river. He said, don't cut us off from the river. This is a system that we may have to use, once in, 50 years. But we have to live with it the rest of the time. So don't cut us off from the river. It's an asset to our community. Don't shut us off from it. And he said, make it beautiful. Make it something that we can embrace as a community, something we can be proud of as a community. So the goals for me personally, as the chairwoman, have been to follow that direction, which I think is very good direction. A couple of things that I just want to be cognizant of as we talk about this, and it's just the technical aspect of some of this. Rob, as we take a look at the levy system, and I have to tell you, I love what we've put together. I like what it looks like. I am pro flood protection 150 million%. I have just a couple questions and a couple things that give me consternation, and I'm going to be very honest about that. From Penn Avenue North, that whole section, talk to me about the ratio of the height of the levee. As you start out from Penn Avenue and you start heading north toward the park, we go from 100-year up to 500-year. And talk to me about the ratio and the height of the levee. Tell me how high the levee's going to have to be from Penn Avenue up to Ellis. I want people to understand what it is that we're going to be doing. I think it's extremely important that when we talk about a levee in that space, especially once you kind of get past Q Avenue, we don't have a lot of room, so that ratio becomes extremely important. just talk to us about the ratio and how that impacts the height of the levee, please, and how high will the levee be from basically what we'll call it Pearson, so people have in their mind what that looks like. So from Q, I think it's Q Avenue, up to Ellis Lane, talk to us about the height of the levee, and I just want us to be very clear about what that's going to look like. So can you share that, please?
And Teresa, feel free to jump in if I don't have the heights, but
Teresa, you can,
Yeah.
please answer, I mean, it doesn't.
it's, we start with 13 feet and go up from there. And it's like 13 to 16 feet is the height, is that about right?
Yeah,
So 13 square, where's 13 feet?
it varies throughout that range, but it's in that range of 13 to about 16 feet throughout north of Penn up to the tie-in.
Okay, so the corner of Ellis Boulevard and Ellis Lane, we're all right at that corner, okay? So how high will the levee be there at that corner, on the riverside?
I don't have that in front of me right now.
Is it gonna be 16 feet?
Well,
The ground is
yeah.
high there because of the topography. You know that it's higher.
Right, that's at the 500.
So it's actually probably not the 16.
It's probably closer to 13.
Probably 13 feet. And how high will it have to be along the Ellis Lane side? So we're going like this, okay, we're going like this along the boulevard, and we get to Ellis Lane. You're gonna have levee here. We've got a temporary berm basically to help us with the 100-yard and ice jams. But, so give me some idea. My point being is that I don't want that corner to be a fortress. And with the height of the levee, and so the height of the levee there and the height of the levee going the other way from Ellis Boulevard, that really bothers me. So I want us to be thinking creatively, and Rob, you and I have had these conversations. What can we do to minimize the impact of a 13-foot levee? Because the ratio is, what, 3 to 1? So for every foot, and that's why it has to be high there, because we don't have a lot of space to spread a levee out like we'd have down in the time check area where we've purchased a lot of that property. We can spread that out so it doesn't go up quite as high. It'll give us that kind of gradual rolling feeling. But at that particular corner, we don't have a lot of space. So my consternation, my concern there is not only what it's going to look like from the street side, and we've talked about maybe raising Ellis Boulevard so we can kind of minimize some of the impact of how that would look like from a car, and how that impacts the street there. What are we going to do there? We're not going to shut down Ellis Boulevard. That's going to be continue to be a major connector for us. So we need to think through how we're going to maybe minimize some of the impact there. And I really did like your idea about raising Ellis Boulevard, so it kind of maybe cuts that in half.
Yeah, I think the ratio you're referring to, that's the 3 to 1 slope.
That's correct.
So if you've got, you can do the math, if it's 3 to 1 slope on either side and it's 15 feet high, that's a slope that takes up 45 feet, and if you've got 15 feet on the top, you have 105 foot
Right.
wide structure, and that's, I think, what
Right.
you're referring to, a very large footprint of
Yep.
a levee.
And then not only that, but along the river, and I know this because I used to swim in it, the channel runs right there along Ellis Boulevard. So if you were coming down from the harbor and you went down the river, and it runs right in front, almost completely all the way down to the dam, that's the channel. That's the channel of our river. And it's the most navigable of parts of the river. And, how are we going to, again, minimize the look of this huge levee on the riverside too? Because, again, we want people out and enjoying the river and boating and, living on the river. And so I want us to be thoughtful about what that looks like on the riverside too. And we've seen some, it's one of the reasons why we've traveled around and looked at different places. We've seen some really creative things done down in Coralville behind the Marriott. We've seen creative things in terms of being able to landscape and sloping. So as we think through this, I know aesthetics is, you know, yet to come, but I'm sitting here today, you know, with this huge decision in front of us, and I don't want us to be, I don't want us not to think about those things, because they will be important in the future. And I want us to be sure that as we move forward, we're not just thinking about, you know, the alignment, but we're also starting to think about the impact that this will have on our community and what it's going to look like and how we can live with it. And I just want to be sure that we do the very best we can to make it really, we embrace it and not just throw out great big huge walls of earth and dirt and call it a levee and not make it look the best it possibly can through that process.
I would just respond with just one or two things that maybe might address that. One, the Army Corps of Engineers understands the city's concern about the removal of flood walls, and you know, they tell us that we've probably got, at least in their opinion, we've got about as much as we possibly could have on that system. At the same time, Dan Miller would tell you, I've been giving him a hard time about redoing the stop log systems on the boulevards crossing or the avenues crossing the river, because if you can come up with a recessed gate type system that just pulls up, you don't have to spend all the time dropping the stop logs in, you could spend it putting them somewhere else.
And that would be great, because we don't have, I mean, we've got one opening there with removables going into the Greenway, and that's farther south along Ellis, but when you get up to that corner, it really could have the potential of looking like a huge fortress in that particular corner. And so if we could put, you know, if we could put some removables in there, that might kind of help open it up again. And if we could think about how we could terrace it or incorporate on the riverside, you know, like what we'd seen down at Coralville behind the Marriott. It's absolutely beautiful. You'd never know. It's it's got these beautiful, you know, walkways and layers, and it really is gorgeous. And I think that if we start, I want us to start thinking about that as we go through that. And the other thing that's extremely important that I don't want us to lose track of is that I want us to continue to work with the neighbors that have chose to stay along the river from Penn Avenue to Ellis Lane. We have a few older homes in there still, and we have a neighborhood that where the owners are, some of them are a lot older. But I want us to continue to talk with them. I want us to continue to communicate with them. I want us to continue to reach out to them and share with them every step of the way. And as I said, one of the things they said to me is, I understand we need to do this. I understand now that where it's going to go, but let me stay as long as I possibly can. And when you need it, then take it. But if you look at our timeline, time check is 10 years down the road. And if they can live there for another 10 years and enjoy the river and continue to be good stewards of the river, then by golly, rather than go in and force them out, which, as I said, I absolutely hate, let's work with them. Let's let them stay, just like Grand Forks did. Let's let them stay as long as they can. Okay. All right. So we are needing a motion, Justin, to move this on to council.
Please.
A recommendation to move it forward.
I just got a couple comments
Okay.
on some of your comments, and
Okay. Thank you.
yeah, I think it always was the city council's, not just your purpose or hope that we work with them people. We let them stay there as long as they possibly can. I think that was everybody's idea.
Okay. Thank you.
That they wanted to do that. We
Right.
just wanted to let folks know that there's going to be a day, someday, that we're gonna have to get this system built.
Glad to hear that, Justin.
So that was, I don't think anybody from anybody working for the city or any council members, I
Glad to hear
don't
that.
think there was any desire to throw people out right away. I I do like the idea of some I think now are ready to move on. And if they want to sell now, that's a great opportunity for them. And I think we also got to remember, you know, you're talking about a stretch of the river. The river runs a long way through our community, and we have to be responsible for that whole stretch to make sure flood protection is provided the whole way. So that's my only comments.
Thank you.
With that, I will make a motion to take this flood protection plan to the full city council, hopefully for their approval.
Thank you. I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everybody. This was a lot of hard work, and we sure appreciate everything that you've all done, and I'm sure the citizens will appreciate it eventually. As the river rises, I know we focus on streets, and we have a lot of work to do on our streets, but as that river rises, anxiety levels go up, and I'll admit to that. Mine does, for sure. And so I think it's really it's a really important thing to get completed and done. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate your help. Is there any public comment? I should ask that. Kevin?
In times past, I've heard discussion about how people turned out in 2008 to help with addressing sandbagging and other things. And something this gentleman said struck me about one of the communities, perhaps it was Fargo, where so much sandbagging is done, that the city had organized in a way so that I would know if the need for sandbagging comes up, that I should go to this spot. And I wonder if that's part of the discussion here, or part of our plan, so that we can organize the volunteer energies that are sure to be there.
I can only speak for myself, but I've always been an advocate of a volunteer system that would help be able to put those lower logs in place. So for me, when we choose those logs, it was important that they be able to lift them, which Justin and I could lift the log and put it into place. So those lower level logs could be done by volunteers rather than sandbagging. And they're reversible, the ones that we're trying now, so that they're easy to put into place. You don't have to have them going one direction. And so I will always advocate for a volunteer corps that's pre-trained, so that in time of an event, we would have the ability to bring out volunteers, either to sandbag or to put the lower removable logs in place. Sandy?
I would add that our interim flood protection today does speak to the use of volunteers for sandbagging, and we work very closely with the Emergency Operations Center, who does that call. And the reason they do the call for Lynn County is because then they count that toward FEMA match and things like that. So we work in concert with them when we call a natural disaster that requires that additional assistance beyond what we can provide as an organization.
Did that answer? Okay, good. Any other questions? Hi, Felicia.
Felicia Wyrick, Friends of Cedar Lake. I was glad to see that the plan is fluid, no pun intended, but because we'll continue to advocate for protecting Cedar Lake, not only for the fact that it's required to get into the DNR Lake Restoration Fund, but we think it's an oversight to overlook the investment that the businesses on Shaver Road made to come back after the flood. It was $25 million at least, so
Thank you.
we won't go away.
Good. Anything else, Justin? Me either. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Hi, Felicia. Nice to meet you.